Before this story starts, do me one favor. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been invited somewhere but not truly welcomed, go ahead and like this video. Subscribe if wisdom still matters to you.
There are two kinds of gatherings in this life, those that feed the soul and those that feed the ego. It's a wise person who learns early on how to tell the difference. You see, a gathering for the soul feels like coming home. It's warm, it's easy. The laughter is real, and it settles in your bones like the heat from a winter fire. There's no performance, no script. You can show up with mud on your boots and a weary heart, and you'll be met with understanding, not judgment. But a gathering for the ego, that's a different beast entirely. It's a stage. It glitters, it shines, but it offers no real warmth. It asks you to bring your best self, but what it really means is your most polished, most carefully constructed self. It's a place of surfaces, where depth is seen as a disruption. Watch closely who invites you when laughter is involved. Is it the free, rolling laughter of shared joy, or the sharp, brittle laughter of shared judgment? The answer tells you everything you need to know.
There was a gathering once, not for need, but for show. It was held in a converted barn, a place that had been scrubbed of its authenticity. The scent of hay and earth had been replaced by expensive perfume and the faint, metallic smell of ambition. It wasn't a celebration of a milestone, not really. It was a carefully orchestrated display of success, a silent auction of social standing, where the currency was proximity to the host. People arrived dressed in their finest, their armor for the evening, shoes polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the calculated warmth of the string lights above. Words rehearsed, anecdotes sharpened, opinions carefully curated to be agreeable, but not forgettable. Smiles were practiced in mirrors before arrival, stretched and held until they became masks, pleasant, impenetrable. Each greeting was a transaction, an assessment. "What can you do for me?" was the question that hung, unspoken, in the perfumed air. At the center of this meticulously crafted universe stood Olivia. She was the architect of it all. She didn't just host the event, she willed it into existence. Every detail had passed through her discerning gaze. The seating chart was a masterpiece of social engineering, a delicate web of power, obligation, and aspiration. The lighting was designed not just to flatter, but to direct, to highlight those she deemed important and cast the rest into soft, elegant shadow. She curated the order of importance, and everyone in the room knew their place in it. To be noticed by Olivia was to be anointed. Her approval was a currency more valuable than the vintage wine being served. She moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, her attention a spotlight she bestowed with strategic precision. A lingering touch on an arm here, a shared laugh there. Each gesture was a move on a grand chessboard only she could see. She was a conductor, and this gathering was her symphony of influence. And then, there was Ruth. Ruth was invited last, an afterthought. Her invitation arrived not in a pristine, embossed envelope, but through a hurried text message a few days prior. She was invited not because she mattered to the intricate social tapestry Olivia was weaving, but precisely because she didn't. She was a filler seat, a warm body to prevent an unlucky number at a table. Her presence was meant to be atmospheric, like the soft music or the flickering candles, present but unnoticed. She worked quietly, not just in her profession, but in her life. She moved carefully, with an economy of motion that spoke of a deep, internal stillness. She had learned long ago, through lessons etched into her memory, that silence often keeps the peace. She understood that in rooms like this, the loudest voices were often the most insecure. Her strength wasn't in what she said, but in what she didn't need to say. She didn't come with rehearsed words or a practiced smile. She came with something far more rare in that room. She came as herself. Olivia saw her enter, of course. Olivia saw everything. A flicker of something. Annoyance, pity, crossed her face before being smoothed away. To Olivia, Ruth was a loose thread in her perfect design, a note slightly out of key. Ruth, in turn, saw Olivia. She saw the performance, the strain beneath the polished surface, the immense effort it took to hold all the pieces together. She didn't see a powerful host. She saw a woman working harder than anyone else in the room, burdened by the weight of her own creation. Their eyes met for a brief second across the glittering expanse, an exchange of two entirely different worlds.
The tallest stalk of wheat is not the strongest. It's just the one that catches the most wind. It's the first to break in a storm. True strength is in the root system, hidden beneath the soil. It's in the quiet, unseen network that holds everything together when the wind howls. Never mistake visibility for value.
The gathering was in full swing, a symphony of laughter and clinking glasses echoing against the old wooden beams of the barn. It was a place of warmth, of community, a carefully constructed ecosystem where everyone knew their part, their place. The air was thick with shared histories and unspoken rules, a comfortable, predictable rhythm. And then, the rhythm broke. When Ruth entered, a sudden silence fell, rippling outwards from the doorway like a stone dropped into a still pond. The collective hum of conversation didn't just fade, it was cut, leaving a vacuum in its wake. Every head turned, every pair of eyes fixed upon the figure standing at the threshold. In that moment, the entire room leaned forward. But it was not a lean of welcome. It was not the warm, gravitational pull of a long-lost friend being received back into the fold. No hands were raised in greeting. No smiles of genuine delight bloomed on their faces. This was the lean of scrutiny, the forward tilt of a jury about to hear a case. They were not preparing to greet her. They were preparing to observe, to dissect, to pass a verdict on her very presence in this space. Each glance was a question, a challenge, a tiny weight added to the air around her. They were a gallery of critics, and she was the unexpected masterpiece, or perhaps the forgery, placed before them. In a room adorned with fine fabrics and subtle jewels, she wore simple clothes. A white dress, modest and with gold fringes and lines with a navy blue ribbon. It was an outfit that spoke not of a lack of means, but of inner confidence. It was a deliberate choice, a quiet refusal to participate in the unspoken competition of appearances that hummed just beneath the surface of the gathering. Her attire was a blank white dress, and it forced the room to look beyond the material. To look at her. And what they saw was unnerving to them. She carried something far more valuable, far more rare than anything that could be bought or worn. She carried composure. It was not the rigid, brittle composure of someone bracing for impact. It was a deep, internal stillness, a quiet strength that radiated from her core, turning the silent judgment of the room into little more than background noise. It was the peace of someone who had already faced their own harshest critic, themselves, and had emerged not defeated but whole. This was not armor, it was skin. And then there was Olivia, seated near the front, a queen in her court. She smiled. But it was not a warm smile. It was not a smile of welcome or kindness. It was a measuring smile. The kind a jeweler gives a stone of unknown quality, assessing its worth, searching for its flaws. It was a smile that held a question, sharp and pointed as a needle. The smile said, without a single word, it was a gatekeeper's smile, a test. It was designed to unnerve, to remind the newcomer of their place, to assert a long-held dominance. Olivia's smile was a weapon disguised as a welcome, and she aimed it with precision. She expected a flinch, a falter, a flicker of doubt in Ruth's eyes. She waited for the composure to crack. But Ruth did not falter. She met the smile not with a challenge, but with a quiet acknowledgement, a slight, almost imperceptible nod, before her gaze returned to the path ahead. She took her steps carefully down the long aisle. Each footfall was deliberate, placed with intention. This was not the caution of someone walking on eggshells, terrified of making a misstep. It was not the hesitation of fear. It was the mindful pace of someone who respected the ground they walked on. But more importantly, respected the journey that had brought them there. It was the walk of a person who understood that their own dignity was not something others could grant or take away. It was something she carried within. She walked not because she was unafraid of their judgment, but because she respected herself more than she feared it. Her steps were a quiet declaration. I am here, and I am enough.
The wise farmer, watching the sun dip below the horizon, once said softly to a young apprentice struggling with the opinions of others, "Don't mistake quiet for weakness. The storm shouts, but the earth absorbs. The deepest roots are grown in silence. Some people," he continued, a gentle smile touching his lips, "walk into rooms already knowing who they are. They don't need the applause, and they are not broken by the silence. Their validation is not a mirror held up by the crowd. It is the solid ground beneath their own 2 feet."
If you've ever been underestimated, share this video with someone who still walks with quiet strength. Now, watch what happens next. The conversation had finally wound down, not to a comfortable conclusion, but to a point of exhaustion. The air in the barn grew thick, heavy with the things left unsaid. It was a silence that wasn't empty, but full of unspoken judgments, quiet allegiances, and the lingering ghost of Olivia's sharp words from earlier. You could almost taste the tension, metallic and sharp, like the air before a storm. The lanterns, which had seemed so warm and inviting just an hour before, now cast long dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and whisper in the corners of the room. People shifted in their seats, avoiding eye contact, studying the patterns in the wooden tables, or the dust motes dancing in the beams of light. It was the kind of quiet that begs to be broken, yet everyone is terrified to be the one to break it. And then, someone did. A voice broke the room. It belonged to an older woman, someone who had lived in this community her whole life, known for her kindness and perhaps a certain naivety. She meant no harm, of course. She likely thought she was helping, trying to smooth over the cracks that had so clearly appeared in the foundation of their gathering. She posed a simple question. Nothing dangerous on the surface. It wasn't an accusation, nor was it a direct challenge. It was a gentle inquiry, wrapped in concern, directed into the open air, but implicitly aimed at Olivia. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling just a little, "when we feel our traditions are being forgotten?" It was the question everyone was thinking, the very heart of the conflict that had been simmering all evening. An innocent question that held all the danger of a lit match in a room full of dry hay. A collective silent gasp seemed to suck the remaining oxygen from the barn. All eyes, which had been so carefully averted, now snapped towards Olivia. The spotlight was on her. The pressure was immense. Olivia stiffened. You could see the storm of emotions on her face. Defensiveness, hurt, a flash of anger. Her jaw tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, and I think everyone expected the same fire, the same sharp-edged defense she had offered before. The air crackled, bracing for the impact of her words, for the argument to reignite, hotter this time. The room held its breath, waiting for the inevitable clash. But then, something else happened. A hand went up, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't a frantic wave for attention, not the eager gesture of someone desperate to be heard. It was a quiet, steady ascent, a single, graceful movement that cut through the tension like a lighthouse beam through fog. It was Ruth's hand. The room froze. It was a strange, cinematic moment. Olivia's mouth, half open, closed. The expectant faces of the guests turned, one by one, like flowers following the sun. Their expressions shifted from anticipation to utter, unadulterated surprise. The shift in focus was palpable, a physical force that moved through the room. It wasn't because Ruth spoke. She hadn't yet said a word. It was because no one expected her to. Ruth was a fixture, a quiet observer. She was the one who listened, who nodded, who offered a gentle smile, but rarely, if ever, her opinion in a public forum. For her to claim the floor in this moment was so profoundly out of character that it commanded more attention than the loudest shout ever could.
The moment a quiet person speaks, the loud discover fear. Not fear of harm, but fear of the unknown. Fear of the truth they have been so busy shouting over.
The woman who had asked the question looked at Ruth, her eyes wide. Even Olivia, who had been poised for battle, simply stared, her own defense forgotten. Ruth's hand remained in the air for a moment longer, a silent request for permission to speak. And in that silence, she was given the floor more completely than anyone else had been all night. She slowly lowered her hand, a sign that she had been seen, and she took a small, centering breath. The entire barn, every soul within it, leaned in. Not just with their bodies, but with their attention. When she finally spoke, her voice was exactly as you would expect. It was soft, not weak. It was gentle, not timid. Ruth's words were calm, measured, true. She didn't look at Olivia, nor did she look at the woman who asked the question. She looked at the space in the middle of the room, as if addressing the community itself, the very spirit of their gathering. She didn't accuse, she didn't defend. She simply answered. She spoke of her own memories, of traditions she had seen change and evolve over her lifetime. She didn't dismiss the fear of losing them, but validated it. And then, with the same gentle grace, she spoke of the beauty of new beginnings, of the strength that comes from welcoming new ideas, new people. She wasn't taking Rebecca's side, nor was she siding with the old guard. She was building a bridge between them with her words. Each sentence was a carefully placed plank laid across the chasm of misunderstanding. And with every word she spoke, you could feel the tension in the room begin to dissolve. Not with a sudden pop, but like sugar melting in warm water. She reminded them that tradition isn't a fortress to be defended, but a garden to be tended, one that needs both old roots and new seeds to thrive. And truth, she proved, does not need volume. It needs only a willing ear and a quiet space to land. Olivia felt it then, that strange shrinking feeling when power meets substance. The room changed temperature, not cold, honest.
The wise farmer said, "Some people decorate rooms, others change them."
By the end of the night, no one remembered the table settings. They remembered the moment Ruth raised her hand.
Never invite someone to feel superior. You might discover who you are not. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall. And never mistake silence for emptiness. Some wells are deep.
If this story gave you clarity, not comfort, then it did its job. Like, subscribe, and remember, walk in rooms like you belong. Because dignity doesn't ask,